The snow fell relentlessly upon the sprawling estate of Harrington Manor, blanketing the English countryside in an unforgiving white shroud. It was December 1928, and the wind howled like a tormented soul outside the frost-laced windows. Inside, the grand hall echoed with forced merriment as Lord Edmund Harrington hosted his annual winter gathering. But merriment turned to horror when a piercing scream shattered the night. Chapter 1. The Blizzard's Shadow. The snow did not fall. It descended, a silent, relentless army of white that marched upon Harrington Manor with the discipline of a Prussian regiment. December 21st, 1928. The shortest day of the year, and already the light had surrendered. By 4 o'clock, the sky was the colour of tarnished pewter, and the wind, mon Dieu, that wind, carved itself into the very bones of the old house. It moaned through the chimneys, rattled the leaded windows, and pressed against the great oak doors as though the storm itself sought entry to the warmth within. Harrington Manor stood upon its hill like a dowager duchess, proud, ancient, and slightly frayed at the hem. 3 stories of honey-coloured stone, crowned with turrets and gargoyles whose stone eyes had watched the seasons turn for 300 years. The drive, once gravel, was now a white ribbon swallowed by drifts. The gates, wrought iron twisted into the Harrington crest, a stag rampant, hung open, frozen ajar by the morning's delivery of coal and post. No one would leave tonight. No one could. Within, the great hall blazed with light and forced cheer. A Christmas tree, Nordman fir, felled from the estate's own woods, towered 20 feet high, its branches heavy with glass baubles and tinsel that caught the firelight like captive stars. Servants in starched aprons darted between guests with silver trays, mulled wine spiced with clove, mince pies dusted with sugar, tiny sandwiches of foie gras and cucumber. The scent was rich, almost cloying, cinnamon, pine, beeswax, and beneath it all, the faint metallic tang of snow that had crept in on coats and boots. Lord Edmund Harrington stood at the foot of the grand staircase, a glass of whisky in one hand, the other resting upon the carved newel post shaped like a griffin. He was 62, but carried his years like a well-tailored coat, broad shoulders, silver hair slicked back, a moustache waxed to points sharp enough to draw blood. His evening dress was impeccable. Midnight blue tailcoat, white tie, a ruby pin winking in the folds. Yet his eyes, pale blue, almost colourless, rested on his guests with the wariness of a man who had spent a lifetime calculating odds. "Merry Christmas, darling," murmured Lady Victoria as she glided past, her gown of emerald silk whispering over the parquet. She was 30 years his junior, with the kind of beauty that made men forget their manners and women their charity. Her hair, black as a raven's wing, was coiled at the nape with a diamond, clip-shaped like a serpent. She did not look at her husband as she spoke. She did not need to. The words were for the room. At 8 o'clock precisely, Lord Harrington excused himself. "Papers to sign," he said, waving away protests. "The storm won't wait for my convenience, and neither will the bankers." He climbed the staircase with the measured tread of a man who owned the world, or believed he did. The study was on the first floor, at the end of the west corridor. Oak-panelled, thick-carpeted, with a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. A single window overlooked the rose garden, now a white wasteland. The door, solid English oak, brass lock, clicked shut behind him. The key turned. From within came the scrape of a chair, the rustle of papers, the pop of a decanter. Downstairs, the party continued. Thorne challenged Blackwood to billiards. Lady Victoria laughed too loudly at a jest from a minor baronet. Amelia refilled glasses with mechanical precision. Poirot, restless, wandered to the library and selected a volume of Dickens, Bleak House, apt for the weather. 9 o'clock. The gramophone wound down. The fire settled into glowing coals. Outside, the snow had reached the windowsills. The world beyond was erased. Poirot closed his book. Something, call it instinct, call it the pricking of those famous grey cells, drew him to the staircase. He ascended slowly, his hand gliding along the banister. The corridor was dim, lit only by a single gas sconce flickering in the draught. Portraits of long-dead Harringtons glared down. Admirals, magistrates, one bishop with a face like a disappointed codfish. The study door loomed ahead. Solid, impenetrable, and yet Poirot paused. No sound from within. No scratch of pen, no creak of chair. Only the wind and the ticking of a grandfather clock at the corridor's end. He raised a manicured hand to knock, then froze. A scream, high, shattering, unmistakably feminine. It came not from the study, but from the end of the corridor. Lady Victoria's boudoir. Poirot moved with surprising speed for one so compact. He reached the boudoir as Thorne and Blackwood arrived breathless. Amelia Croft was already there, pressed against the wall, her face the colour of tallow. Lady Victoria stood in the doorway of the study, her hands clamped over her mouth. The door, which had been locked, now hung ajar. A ribbon of light spilled into the corridor, illuminating her emerald gown like a stage spotlight. "Edmund," she whispered, the name barely audible. Then louder, a wail, "Edmund!" Poirot slipped past her. The study was as Harrington had left it, almost. The fire burned low. Papers lay scattered across the desk like fallen leaves. The decanter stood open, a glass half full beside it, and Lord Edmund Harrington. He was slumped forward, his head resting on the blotter as though in exhausted sleep. But the dagger, mon Dieu, the dagger, protruded from his back at an impossible angle, the blade buried to the hilt between his shoulder blades. Blood had soaked through his tailcoat, pooling beneath him in a dark viscous lake that reflected the firelight like spilled ink. Poirot's gaze swept the room with the precision of a surgeon. He knelt, careful not to disturb the scene. Harrington's eyes were open, staring sightlessly at a single sheet of paper beneath his cheek. Ink had bled where his blood met it, but Poirot could make out the words, "The past catches up, forgive me." Suicide? Impossible. The angle of the dagger, driven downward from behind, could not have been self-inflicted. And the locked room. Inspector Japp arrived, hatless, his coat buttoned wrong. "Poirot! What the devil?" He took in the scene and swore under his breath. "Locked room! No tracks! Blast this snow!" Lady Victoria swayed. Blackwood caught her, guiding her to a chair. "Shock," he muttered, producing a vial from his waistcoat. "Smelling salts." Thorne stood frozen in the doorway, his cigarette forgotten, ash lengthening until it fell to the carpet. "He was alive at 8, he said hoarsely. "We spoke about the merger. He was agitated." Amelia Croft wrung her apron. "I brought his brandy at 7:30, sir. He took it himself. Said he didn't want disturbing." Poirot straightened, his eyes bright as a stoat's. "And yet he was disturbed. Fatally." He turned to Japp. "We must preserve the scene. No one enters, no one leaves the manor. The storm has made us prisoners, and the murderer among us." While Japp telephoned the local constabulary, lines down, no hope of aid until the thaw, Poirot began his examination. The dagger. No fingerprints but Harrington's own, and those smudged. The wound, clean entry, but the blade had been twisted, rage or to ensure death. Blood spatter arced across the desk, suggesting the blow came from someone standing behind the chair. Yet Harrington had been facing the door, the brandy glass, a faint almond scent beneath the peat. Poison? Poirot sniffed, then stoppered his nostrils with a handkerchief. Cyanide, perhaps, but the dagger? He moved to the window. The latch was stiff, rusted, no sign of tampering. Outside, the snow was unbroken, a virgin field stretching to the stables. A single set of footprints led to the window, from the direction of the kitchen garden, but none away. And they were small. A woman's, Amelia's, the desk drawer was open. Inside, a revolver, unloaded, a bundle of letters tied with red ribbon, a will dated yesterday, leaving the bulk of the estate to Lady Victoria, the rest to charities. Thorn and Blackwood received legacies, generous but not controlling. Downstairs, the guests gathered in the drawing room, faces pale in the lamplight. The Christmas tree lights had been switched off. Only the fire remained, casting long shadows that danced like accusing fingers. Lady Victoria sat wrapped in a cashmere shawl, her eyes red but dry. "He was going to divorce me," she said suddenly. The room stilled. "This morning, he found letters." She glanced at Thorn, who looked away. Blackwood poured her brandy. "Steady, my dear. Shock does strange things." Thorn lit another cigarette with shaking hands. "We argued, yes, but I left him alive. Ask Blackwood. We played billiards until 9. Blackwood nodded. "True, though I stepped out briefly to fetch my pipe." A pause. The corridor was empty. Amelia Croft stood by the door, twisting her apron until the fabric tore. "I heard nothing," she insisted, "nothing until her ladyship screamed." Poirot entered then, silent as a cat. All eyes turned to him. He carried a small object wrapped in his handkerchief, a torn scrap of paper, found beneath the desk. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the storm has trapped us, yes. But it has also trapped the murderer. This," he unfolded the cloth, "was beneath Lord Harrington's hand." The paper was heavy cream stock, torn from a larger sheet. In hurried pencil, "Midnight, the old summer house, come alone or all is lost." No signature, but the handwriting, spidery impatient, was unmistakable. Harrington's own. Thorn frowned. He wrote it himself, then, or someone wished us to believe so. Poirot finished. "The summer house is half a mile through the woods, in this storm. Impossible. And yet," he held the note to the light, "the ink is fresh, written after 8 o'clock, after he locked himself in." A log cracked in the fireplace. Lady Victoria gasped. Poirot's eyes swept the room. Someone entered that study. Someone killed Lord Harrington, and someone left, leaving no trace in the snow, no mark on the door. A locked room mystery, mes amis. But Hercule Poirot. He tapped his temple. He does not believe in impossibilities, only in truths waiting to be uncovered. Outside, the wind howled louder, as though the storm itself laughed at the little detective's bravado. As the clock struck 11, the electricity faltered, then died. The room plunged into firelit gloom. Someone screamed. A window shattered in the hall beyond. Poirot sprang to the door, Jap at his heels. In the corridor, snow swirled through a broken pane. Footprints, small, hurried, led from the window to the staircase and vanished. On the floor lay a single white camellia, its petals stained with a single drop of blood. The winter death had only begun its revelation. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The drawing-room had become a court of suspicion. The great chandelier, now unlit, hung above them like a frozen waterfall of crystal. Only the hearth gave light, throwing long shadows that stretched and twisted across the damask walls. 12 souls sat in a loose circle, the Christmas tree a dark sentinel in the corner, its baubles glinting like watchful eyes. Hercule Poirot stood at the mantel, small and immaculate, his patent leather shoes reflecting the flames. His overcoat was folded neatly over a chair, his grey spats spotless despite the snow. Inspector Japp, bowler in hand, paced behind him like a terrier denied a rat. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice precise, carrying the faint lilt of Liège, "we are prisoners of the storm and of a murderer. Lord Harrington was killed between 8 and 9 o'clock. The door locked from within, the window sealed, no footprints in the snow. Yet he is dead, stabbed, possibly poisoned, and a note, he held up the camellia-stained scrap, written in his own hand, luring him to an impossible rendezvous." He paused, letting the silence settle like dust. Lady Victoria Harrington sat nearest the fire, wrapped in a sable coat despite the warmth. Her emerald gown was hidden now, but the diamond serpent in her hair caught the light like a warning. "He was alive when I left him at 7:30, she said, voice brittle. "We quarrelled. He accused me of indiscretions." Her glance flicked to Reginald Thorne, who stood by the window staring into the white void. He threatened divorce, said he'd changed his will. I went to the library, read until 9, asked the footman. James saw me. Thorne turned, cigarette smoke curling from his nostrils. "Edmund and I argued at 8. The merger. He wanted me out. My debts." He laughed a hollow sound. "Yes, I needed his money, but I didn't kill him. Blackwood and I played billiards from 8:15, ask him." Dr. Elias Blackwood adjusted his pince-nez, the firelight glinting off the lenses. "True, we played 3 frames. I left at 8:40 to fetch my pipe from the smoking room, returned at 9. Thorne was still at the table. Alone." A pause. "Edmund had a heart condition. I warned him about excitement." Amelia Croft, the maid, stood by the door, hands knotted in her apron. "I took his lordship's brandy at 7:30. He locked the door after me. Said he wanted no disturbances. I was in the kitchen until her ladyship screamed." Poirot's eyes, green and bright as a cat's, moved from face to face. "And the camellia? It is not from the conservatory. Those are red. This is white, rare. Grown only in the old summer-house greenhouse, half a mile away, through the storm." He produced the flower from his pocket, wrapped in silk. The blood droplet had dried to rust. Found beneath the broken window. Someone entered or left that way. Yet the snow outside is unbroken save for those small footprints, leading to the house, not away. Japp snorted. "A ghost, then?" "Non, mon ami. A murderer with foresight. Observe." Poirot knelt by the French windows. The latch was scratched, as if forced with a thin blade. The storm covered their retreat, but not their arrival. He opened the window. Snow swirled in, stinging their faces. The footprints, small, jagged, narrow, began 10 feet from the house where the eaves had protected the ground. They led inward. None led out. "Impossible," Thorne muttered. "Precisely," Poirot smiled. "Impossible, unless the murderer remained within the manor." Back in the study, now guarded by a constable borrowed from the village, Poirot reconstructed the scene with theatrical flair. "The dagger," he said, pointing to the empty scabbard above the mantel, "was taken before 8 o'clock. The twin remains. Someone planned this." He examined the desk, the half-empty brandy glass, the almond scent stronger now. Cyanide, enough to kill in minutes, but the stab wound, he mimed the blow, was post-mortem, to mislead. Japp scratched his head. "So he was poisoned, then stabbed after death. Why?" "To create the locked room. The murderer entered with a key, perhaps a duplicate, poisoned the brandy, left. Harrington locked the door. drank, died. Then Poirot's eyes gleamed. The killer returned, through the secret passage. Behind the bookshelf, a false panel, concealed by leather-bound volumes of the Times, a narrow door clicked open. Dust motes danced in the torchlight. A spiral stair descended into darkness. "The passage leads to the wine cellar," Poirot said, "and from there to the boot room. The murderer entered twice. Once to poison, once to stage the dagger and lock the door from within, using a string, perhaps, pulled through the keyhole." He demonstrated with a length of twine. The key turned, the string withdrawn, the door locked, the illusion complete. "But the footprints," Lady Victoria began. "Were made earlier," Poirot finished, "when the snow was lighter. The murderer walked to the house under the eaves, entered via the cellar, committed the crime, and left the same way. The storm erased their exit. The camellia planted to suggest an outsider." As Poirot closed the panel, a heavy thud echoed from the floor above. Footsteps, rapid, panicked, raced along the corridor. Japp drew his revolver. "Stay here." Poirot was already moving. They reached the west wing. Lady Victoria's boudoir door stood open. Inside, the room was ransacked. Drawers emptied, dresses torn from the wardrobe. On the dressing table, a single object gleamed, a pearl-handled revolver. One bullet fired into the mirror. The glass spider-webbed around the hole. And on the floor, a second camellia, fresh, unstained, its petals arranged in a perfect circle. Beneath it, a note in the same spidery hand. "The winter death claims its second. Midnight. The summer house. Come alone." The clock struck 11:30. Outside, the storm redoubled, as if the house itself were screaming. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Hall. Lady Victoria's boudoir smelled of gunpowder and French perfume. The shattered mirror reflected a dozen fractured Victorias, each more distraught than the last. The pearl-handled revolver lay where it had fallen, its barrel still, warm. One bullet gone. The camellia beneath the note was pristine, as though plucked moments ago. Poirot knelt, careful of the glass. He lifted the flower with tweezers fashioned from a hairpin. "White camellia," he murmured, "symbol of perfect love, or perfect death." He sniffed the petals. Greenhouse scent, earth, and something else, chloroform. Inspector Japp sniffed the revolver. "Fired recently, but no body, no blood save that on the first flower." Poirot's gaze swept the room. The window was latched. No footprints beneath. The door had been locked. Lady Victoria swore she had retired to the library after dinner, leaving her room empty. Then the intruder had a key, Poirot concluded, or was let in. He examined the note. Same cream stock, same spidery hand, but the ink, fresher, still tacky, written here. Downstairs, the household assembled in the hall, summoned by the gunshot's echo. Faces pale, eyes wide, the Christmas tree lights had been relit. They blinked like nervous sentinels. Lady Victoria clutched a lace handkerchief. "I was in the library until 11, reading Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Hardly a motive for murder. I heard the shot, came running. Thorn, coatless, tie askew, held a billiard cue like a weapon. Blackwood and I were in the smoking room. We heard it too, came at once." Blackwood nodded, but his eyes darted to the revolver. "That's my prescription case on the dressing table. Someone rifled it." Amelia Croft hovered at the foot of the stairs, a candle in her trembling hand. "I was polishing silver in the pantry, sir. Heard nothing till the bang." Poirot held up the note. "Midnight, the summer house. Who was intended to receive this?" Silence. Then Lady Victoria whispered, "Edmund kept a revolver in his study drawer. This one was mine. A gift. I thought it lost." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Lost or stolen?" Poirot led Japp, Thorn, and Blackwood to the study. The hidden panel stood ajar. The spiral stair descended into blackness, the air damp and wine-sour. "Torch!" Poirot commanded. Japp produced a bull's-eye lantern. They descended single file. The passage was narrow, hewn through stone. Cobwebs brushed their faces. At the bottom, a wooden door opened into the wine cellar, racks of dusty bottles, a single bulb swinging from a cord. Footprints in the dust, small, recent, led to a second door, the boot room. From there, a side entrance to the kitchen garden. Snow had drifted against the outer door, but the latch was unfastened. Poirot knelt. The murderer exited here after planting the camellia. But the shot, he checked his pocket watch. 11:28. The storm has covered all tracks now. Thorne shivered. Edmund's ghost? The summer house lay half a mile through the woods. A folly of glass and iron now half buried in drifts. The greenhouse attached to it was locked, but the padlock hung open, chain cut, cleanly. Inside, warmth hit them like a slap. A paraffin heater glowed. Rows of camellias, white, pink, red, bloomed defiantly against the winter. On a potting bench, gardening shears, a bottle of chloroform, and a single white bloom missing from its stem. Poirot lifted a glass cloche. Beneath a third note, identical hand. "You ignored the first warning. The second will not miss." Japp swore. "Someone's playing cat and mouse." Poirot examined the chloroform bottle. "Medical grade. Dr. Blackwood's prescription stamp." Blackwood paled. "My bag was in the hall. Anyone could have taken it." They returned through the storm, snow crusting their lashes. The manor loomed, windows glowing like eyes. Poirot gathered them in the hall. "The murderer wishes a midnight meeting. We shall oblige, but on our terms." He assigned positions. "But the study is a crime scene," Japp protested. "Precisely," Poirot smiled. "The murderer will return for something left behind." At 12:05, the lights died again. Darkness swallowed the manor. Poirot and Lady Victoria sat in the study, the hidden panel open. A single candle burned. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, descended the spiral stair. A figure emerged, cloaked in black, face obscured by a scarf. In one hand, a dagger, the twin to the murder weapon. In the other, the pearl revolver. The figure froze, seeing Poirot. "Bonsoir," the detective said mildly. "You are punctual." The scarf slipped. Amelia Croft's terrified eyes stared back. I didn't kill him," she stammered, "but I know who did. They made me write the notes. Said they'd frame me for theft. A crash from the cellar. Japp's shout. Running feet. Poirot sprang. The candle guttered out. In the darkness, a second shot rang out, this time from the summer house direction. The winter death was not finished. Chapter 4. The False Trail. The second shot came from the summer house path, sharp and final. Poirot, lantern raised, burst from the study with Lady Victoria close behind. Amelia Croft stumbled after them, wrists bound with Poirot's silk cravat. Japp's shout, "Here! Over here!" cut through the storm. They found the inspector kneeling in the snow beside a dark shape. Reginald Thorne lay on his back, one hand pressed to his left shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, black against the white. The billiard cue lay snapped beside him. "Caught him running," Japp panted. "Fired a warning, thought he was the killer." Thorne's teeth chattered. "Idiot! I saw a figure, black cloak, heading for the greenhouse. Chased it. Then bang!" Poirot examined the wound. Through the coat. Flesh, not fatal. But the bullet, he dug into the snow with gloved fingers, is from Lady Victoria's revolver, the same weapon that shattered the mirror. Fresh prints, larger than Amelia's, led from the summer house to a side gate in the estate wall. There they stopped. Motorcars' tyre tracks, half filled already, pointed toward the village road. Someone had a vehicle waiting, Japp growled. Planned escape. Poirot knelt. Tyres are Dunlop, narrow, a Morris Cowley perhaps, but in this storm, the road is impassable beyond the bridge. He turned to Amelia. You said they forced you to write the notes. Who is they? Amelia's voice shook. I don't know the face. Scarf, hat low. A man's voice, educated. Said if I didn't help, I'd hang for the jewels and the murder. Gave me the camellias, the paper. Told me to leave the second note in her ladyship's room. Lady Victoria gasped. Jewels! Poirot led them to Amelia's attic room above the stables. A loose floorboard pried up with a poker revealed a chamois pouch. Inside, a diamond brooch shaped like a horseshoe, Lady Victoria's, missing since Ascot. I never took it, Amelia cried. It appeared 2 days ago under my pillow, with a note, keep silent, or this goes to the police. Poirot held the brooch to the candle. Paste, he declared. Glass, not diamond. A forgery to discredit Mademoiselle Croft. He produced a loupe. See the setting? Modern claws. The original was Edwardian. Someone wished to frame the maid, and used her fear of dismissal. Blackwood cleared his throat. I treated Amelia for nerves last month. Prescribed bromide. Anyone could have seen the bottle. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Convenient. Observe. Poirot tapped the card. The murderer needed 2 entries to the study, first to poison the brandy, before the lock. Second, to stab the corpse and lock from within using the string trick. But the string, he produced a length of black thread from the keyhole, was cut with left-handed scissors. Who is left-handed? Thorne raised his right hand sheepishly. Blackwood, both. Lady Victoria, right. Amelia. The maid lifted trembling left fingers. Yet the footprints to the greenhouse were a man's size, Poirot continued. Size 10 hobnail. Amelia wears 4s. Japp, rummaging in the cloakroom, produced a driving gauntlet. Left hand, blood-stained, monogrammed RT. Thorns? Lady Victoria exclaimed. Thorne stared. I lost that glove weeks ago in London. Poirot sniffed the blood. Fresh, applied tonight, and the monogram stitched recently. The thread is crimson silk, not the original black. He turned the glove inside out. A scrap of paper fluttered free. The merger is off. You're finished. E.H. Thorne laughed bitterly. Edmund's hand, but I never received such a note. Forged like the rest. Poirot's gaze swept the room. A trail of false clues, paste jewels, forged notes, planted glove, misfired revolver, all to confuse. But one detail does not lie. He held up the chloroform bottle from the greenhouse. Dr. Blackwood's stamp, but the cork, he removed it, bears teeth marks, human, upper left incisor, chipped. Blackwood froze. Slowly, he smiled, revealing the exact flaw. Before anyone could move, the lights, miraculously restored, blazed on. In the sudden glare, a panel in the drawing-room wainscoting slid open. A figure in black burst forth, face masked, dagger raised, Japp lunged, the mask slipped. Dr. Elias Blackwood, the real one, stood revealed, eyes wild. But the man with the dagger was also Blackwood. Twins. The masked man hissed, You weren't meant to see this, Poirot. He hurled the dagger, not at the detective, but at the chandelier chain. Crystal exploded downward in a deadly rain. Darkness swallowed the room again. When the candles were relit, the masked Blackwood was gone. The real doctor lay bound and gagged behind the panel, a bruise blooming on his temple. On the floor, a final camellia, crushed, its petals spelling in blood. Next time the bullet finds its mark, the false trail had become a death trap. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The real Dr. Blackwood, bruised wrists chafed raw, sat in a wing chair while Japp cut his bonds. "Elias and Emile," he rasped. "My brother. Thought dead in the war. He survived. Came back last year. Needed money. I refused." Poirot's eyes glittered. "A doppelganger. The perfect disguise. Emile wears your clothes, your spectacles, your face. He moves through the house unseen because he is seen, as you." Emile Blackwood had vanished through the wainscoting panel. Another secret passage, this one behind the portrait of a stern Harrington ancestor. Dust on the floorboards showed frequent use. Lady Victoria stared at the crushed camellia. Then the chloroform, the notes, Emile's work, the doctor confirmed. He blamed Edmund for our family's ruin. A munitions contract in 1916. Edmund exposed fraud. Father shot himself. Emile swore revenge. Poirot produced the clipping, found tucked in the real Blackwood's medical bag. Harrington clears name in shell scandal, partner suicide. Below, a grainy photograph of Lord Harrington, younger, smug. Beside him, a caption, "Dr. E. Blackwood, unavailable for comment." Emile was the junior partner, Poirot explained. Disappeared after the inquiry, presumed dead at the Somme. But he survived, scarred, bitter, returned to find his brother prosperous, Harrington richer, the perfect motive. Japp scratched his chin. So Emile poisons the brandy, stages the stabbing, plants clues to frame the rest of us? Exactament. The paste brooch, the forged note, the glove, all to create chaos. But one error. Poirot held up the chipped incisor cork. "Emile's dental flaw, not yours, Doctor." Poirot led them into the wainscoting passage. Narrow, plaster-dusted, it snaked behind the drawing room, the library, the guest bedrooms. A map, charred at the edges, lay discarded in a mouse nest. Hand-drawn, labelled in German, Fluchtweg, Harrington Herrenhaus. Escape routes, Poirot, translated. Smugglers' tunnels, 18th century, updated during the war. Harrington stored munitions here. Emile knew them from the contract days. The attic was a graveyard of furniture. Sheeted chases, cracked mirrors, a child's rocking horse staring with one glass eye. A camp bed, a Primus stove, a stack of tin beans. Emile had lived here for weeks. On a crate, a false beard, spirit gum, a second pair of pince-nez. A medical bag, Elias's spare, open. Inside, cyanide crystals, a hypodermic, and a single white camellia in a jam jar. Poirot lifted a leather-bound journal. Emile's handwriting, spidery, furious. Edmund dies on the winter solstice, anniversary of father's ruin. Elias will watch, helpless. Then the fortune is mine. A floorboard creaked behind them. Emile Blackwood stepped from the shadows, dagger in one hand, Lady Victoria's revolver in the other. His face, identical to his twins save for a livid scar across the left cheek, was calm. "You're too late, Poirot. The will is witnessed. Elias inherits everything. I simply remove the obstacles." He had Amelia Croft by the throat, the dagger at her carotid. "She's useful," Emile sneered. "Writes a fair forgery. And if anyone questions Elias's absence," he shrugged, "a tragic accident in the storm." Poirot's voice was silk over steel. "You poisoned the brandy at 7:30, wearing your brother's coat. Amelia saw you, thought you were Elias. You returned at 9, via the cellar, to stab the corpse and lock the door. But the string trick, your left-handed scissors, betrayed you." Emile's scar twitched. "Details. The storm will cover my escape. The Morris is fueled beyond the bridge." Lady Victoria stepped forward. "You used my revolver, my camellias. Why? To implicate you, my dear, the faithless wife, Thorne's lover, the perfect scapegoat." He tightened his grip on Amelia. She whimpered. Poirot's hand slipped into his pocket. "One more detail, monsieur. The camellia in the greenhouse, it was grafted. A white bloom on a red stem. Impossible in nature. You forced it with chemicals. The jar, he gestured, still smells of ether. Emile laughed. Clever Belgian, but logic won't stop a bullet. He raised the revolver. Jap lunged from the stairs. Emile fired. The bullet splintered the rocking horse's ear. In the chaos, Amelia twisted free, elbowing Emile's scarred cheek. The dagger clattered. Poirot tackled him, surprisingly strong. The revolver skidded across the floorboards. But Emile was younger, desperate. He shoved Poirot into a sheeted wardrobe, grabbed the dagger, and vanished down a hatch in the floor, a fourth tunnel, unmarked on the map. Jap fired after him, too late. The hatch slammed. A bolt slid home. From below, a muffled explosion rocked the manor. Dust rained from the beams. The primus stove, knocked over in the struggle, had ignited the ether-soaked camellia jar. Flames licked upward through the floorboards. The attic was ablaze, and somewhere in the walls, Emile Blackwood laughed, a sound like breaking ice, as the winter death claimed the house itself. Chapter 6. The web titan's heat slapped them as the camellia jar exploded into blue fire. Ether-fed flames raced along the floorboards, licking at centuries of dust and varnish. "Out! Vite!" Poirot shouted, coughing into his handkerchief. Jap hauled the real Dr. Blackwood by the collar. Lady Victoria stumbled after, her sable coat smouldering at the hem. Amelia Croft screamed as a burning beam crashed behind them, blocking the stair. Poirot's eyes darted. The skylight, too high. The hatch Emile had used, bolted from below. He seized a brass fire bucket, dumped sand, and swung it at the flames. A narrow path opened to the opposite wall. A servant's ladder, forgotten, half-rotted, descended into the west wing. They slid down, splinters tearing clothes. Below, the corridor was already filling with smoke. Alarms, modern, Harrington's pride, clanged uselessly. The storm had cut the telephone hours ago. The household spilled into the hall like ants from a kicked nest. Footmen in shirt-sleeves formed a chain from the kitchen pump. Ladies in dressing gowns clutched jewels and photographs. Poirot took command. "Buckets to the west stair! Blankets to smother Jap! Find Emile!" Jap vanished into the smoke, revolver drawn. Poirot herded the guests to the great hall. The Christmas tree, miraculously untouched, stood sentinel as sparks drifted like hellish snow. Lady Victoria collapsed onto a settee, face soot-streaked. "The tunnels! He'll escape through the tunnels!" Amelia, eyes wide, nodded. "There's a grate in the wine cellar, leads to the ice house. From there, the river." Poirot's mind raced. The river, frozen, but the ice house had a boathouse. The Morris Cowley tracks had ended at the bridge. Emile had planned a second escape. Poirot, Jap, and 2 sturdy footmen braved the storm to the ice house, a stone bunker beside the frozen river. The padlock was smashed. Inside, sawdust and blocks of ice glistened under lantern light. A trail of blood, Emile's cheek perhaps, led to a trapdoor. Below, the boathouse. A punt bobbed in black water where the river refused to freeze. Oars missing. On the dock, a coil of rope, a lantern and a white camellia floating in a puddle of meltwater. Poirot knelt. He crossed the river on the ice, but where? Jap pointed upstream. A single set of hobnail prints, size 10, marched across the frozen surface, disappearing into the pine woods on the far bank. In the library, books scorched but intact, Poirot gathered the survivors around the scene of the original crime. The study door stood open, the dagger still in Harrington's back like a grim exclamation mark. He laid out the evidence like cards in a solitaire game. Emile needed chaos. Poirot explained. Frame the wife, the partner, the maid. Then, as Elias, inherit. The fire was to destroy evidence, and us. Dr. Blackwood, the real one, spoke hoarsely. He locked me in the passage when I confronted him yesterday, planned to kill me after Harrington. Dawn revealed the truth. The hobnail prints ended at a fishing hut, half a mile upstream. Inside, Emil's black cloak soaked and frozen stiff. A hole in the ice beside the hut, jagged, fresh. A camellia floated in the dark water, petals spreading like a bloodstain. Jap dragged the river with a boathook. It snagged on something heavy. Emil Blackwood's body rose, face blue, scar livid, eyes staring at the sky he would never see again. The dagger, the twin, was buried in his own chest. Suicide or justice? Poirot examined the wound. Self-inflicted. The angle matches his left hand. He knew the net closed, chose the river over the rope. With Emil dead, the manor exhaled. The fire was out. The storm weakened to flurries. Poirot returned to the study to close the case. On the blotter, beneath Harrington's cold hand, a fresh envelope, cream stock, sealed with black wax. Inside, a single sheet. Emil's spidery hand. If you read this, I failed. But the winter death is not one man. Look to the will. The true heir lives, and they will kill again. E.B. Poirot's moustache bristled. He opened the will. The codicil favouring Elias was missing. In its place, a new page, Harrington's hand witnessed by Amelia Croft, and an unknown second signatory. The beneficiary, my natural son, born 1903, name withheld until majority. A bastard heir, hidden alive. And somewhere in the manor, a clock struck 6. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, echoed in the secret passage. The winter death had a successor. Chapter 7. Deductions emerge. Poirot read the codicil aloud, his voice cutting through the hush. To my natural son, born 30 March 1903 at St. Mary's lying in Hospital, London, name withheld until his majority, I bequeath the entirety of Harrington Manor, the shipping line, and all unentailed assets. In trust until his 25th year. Witness this 20th day of December, 1928 signatures. Edmund Harrington, Amelia Croft, and a second scrawl, illegible but sealed with a signet ring, a stag rampant. Lady Victoria's hand flew to her throat. A son? Edmund swore there were no others. He was sterile after the war. Shrapnel. Poirot's eyes glittered. Yet here is proof, and the second witness, he tapped the seal, is the Harrington crest. Only one ring exists. It was on Lord Harrington's finger when he died. Jap whistled. So the boy's 25 now, and someone knew. Amelia trembled. His lordship called me to the study at 6 o'clock yesterday. Said he'd received a letter, postmarked London, from a solicitor. The boy wanted his birthright. Lord Harrington laughed at first, then changed. Said he'd rewrite the will that night. Made me sign. The other, witness, she swallowed, was a man in a chauffeur's cap, face hidden. He left by the terrace. Poirot produced the envelope from Emil's body. Inside, a birth certificate, yellowed, stamped St. Mary's 1903. Mother, Miss Eleanor Gray, actress. Father, E. Harrington, Esq. Eleanor Gray, Poirot mused, a music hall soubrette. Died 1918, the boy was fostered. Dr. Blackwood, the real one, spoke. Edmund mentioned a dalliance once. Drunken confession. I thought it boast. But Emil burned the attic, Jap objected. Why reveal the heir if he wanted the fortune? Poirot smiled thinly. Because Emil did not write the final note. Observe, he held the envelope to the window. Watermark, Crane's Crest, 1928. The others were Basildon Bond, 1925. Someone else placed this after Emil's death. The true heir, or his agent. Poirot and Jap followed the chauffeur's tracks from the terrace to the garage. A Daimler was missing. Harrington's second car, rarely used. Tyre marks matched the Morris and a wider tread. 2 vehicles, Japp said. 1 for a meal, 1 for the chauffeur. Inside the garage, a chauffeur's cap, blood-stained. A white camellia pinned to the visor. Beneath, a brass button engraved Harrington Yacht Club. Poirot's grey cell's word. The boy was raised near the sea. The mother's people were from Southampton. A stable boy, half frozen, confirmed. A man in a cap asked after the master last week. Said he was family. Gave me a shilling to keep quiet. The chapel was locked, but the key hung on a nail, recently used. Inside, pews askew, a sarcophagus lid shifted. Poirot lifted it. Empty, but on the stone floor, a child's shoe, size 3, patent leather, dated 1908, and a locket, Eleanor Gray's face, young and laughing. A hidden door behind the altar led to a priest's hole. Inside, a camp bed, tinned food, a yachting jacket with the Harrington crest. A photograph, a young man, 25, dark hair, Harrington's nose. On the back, to father from your son, R.H. R.H., Poirot murmured. Reginald Harrington. No, Thorne's middle name is Reginald, but his mother... Lady Victoria gasped. Thorne's mother was an actress, Eleanor Gray. He told me once, in confidence. The chapel bell tolls 7. A shadow detaches from the crypt wall. Poirot whirled. Reginald Thorne stood in the doorway, shoulder bandaged, face pale but composed. In his hand, the missing signet ring. "You're quick, Poirot," he said softly. "Too quick." He raised Lady Victoria's revolver, reloaded. "Edmund was my father. He abandoned us. I came to claim what's mine. Emile was a tool, mad useful. I fed him the tunnels, the camellias, the will. When he became a liability, I let the ice take him." Japp reached for his gun. Thorne fired into the ceiling. Plaster rained. "Walk!" Thorne ordered. "To the boathouse. The Daimler's fueled. We're leaving. I'm leaving with the will." As they marched into the dawn, Poirot's hand slipped into his pocket. A length of twine. The same string from the study lock. Behind them, the chapel door slammed. A bolt slid home. From the crypt, a baby's cry echoed again, impossible, yet real. Thorne smiled. "Insurance, my son, the line continues." The winter death had a dynasty. Chapter 8. The Chase in Snow. The Daimler's engine snarled to life, its twin exhausts belching blue smoke into the crystalline air. Thorne shoved Poirot, Japp and Lady Victoria into the rear seat, the signet ring glinting on his trigger finger. Amelia and Dr. Blackwood were locked in the chapel crypt with the crying infant. The chauffeur's cap sat on the parcel shelf like a trophy. "Drive!" Thorne barked to the empty front seat, then laughed. "No driver needed. I learned on the docks." He slid behind the wheel, the revolver balanced on his thigh. The car lurched forward, tires spinning on packed snow, then gripped and shot down the service road toward the river bridge. Poirot's voice was calm. "You cannot outrun the truth, Monsieur Thorne. The will is witnessed. The boy is leverage," Thorne snapped. "My son. Born last year to a housemaid in Southampton. Harrington blood. The estate will fight for him, not against him." The Daimler fish-tailed onto the ice-crusted bridge. Beneath, the river ran black and swift, its surface a cracked mirror. Japp's hand crept toward the door handle. Thorne noticed. "Try it, Inspector, and the lady gets the first bullet." Lady Victoria's eyes blazed. "You used me. The letters, the affair—" "Insurance," Thorne repeated. "A scandal to keep Edmund distracted. You were perfect, beautiful, bored, titled. He never suspected his own bastard was courting his wife." Snow began again, fat flakes that blurred the windscreen. The wipers scraped uselessly. Thorne leaned forward, squinting. The road narrowed between stone walls, the river on one side, a sheer drop on the other. Poirot's fingers worked the twine in his pocket. "The camellias," he said conversationally. "You grew them in the greenhouse to mark your kills. One for each betrayal. Eleanor, Emile, Edmund, and now, silence." Thorn accelerated. The speedometer climbed past 40. The bridge's end loomed, a cattle grid, then open fields to the village. Jap whispered, "On my mark." The Daimler hit the grid. Metal screamed. A front tyre burst with a bang like a gunshot. The car slewed sideways, smashing through the stone parapet. For a heartbeat it hung in the air, nose down, then plunged toward the ice. Thorn screamed. Lady Victoria lunged for the wheel. Poirot looped the twine around Thorn's wrist and yanked. The revolver fired wild, shattering the windscreen. Cold air roared in. The car struck the river, ice shattered. Water exploded upward in a white plume. The Daimler bobbed once, twice, then the Ikea current seized it, spinning it like a toy. Inside, chaos. Water surged through the broken window, black and icy. Thorn clawed at the door. Poirot kicked it open. Jap hauled Lady Victoria out. The three swam for the jagged hole as the car sank, taillights winking out like dying eyes. They crawled onto the ice, gasping. The Daimler vanished beneath, a dark shape swallowed by the river. Thorn's hand broke the surface once, fingers spread, the signet ring flashing, then was gone. Snow filled the hole. The river closed over its secret. Back at the manor, the chapel bell tolled 8. Dr. Blackwood and Amelia emerged, the infant swaddled in Blackwood's coat. The child's cry had been a gramophone record. Thorn's cruel jest, hidden in the crypt to buy time. Poirot stood on the bank soaked, shivering but triumphant. "The winter death ends in water," he said, "as all false trails do." The snow kept falling, erasing the Daimler's tracks, the blood, the lies. Harrington Manor stood silent behind them, its secrets buried deeper than any grave. Chapter 9. The Revelation. The great hall had become a tribunal once more. The Christmas tree, half its needle scorched, stood crooked in the corner like a wounded soldier. Sunlight, thin and pale, filtered through the broken French windows and lay in silver bars across the blood-stained rug. Every survivor was present. Lady Victoria in a borrowed dressing gown, Dr. Blackwood with soot in his eyebrows, Amelia cradling the infant who had never been Thorn's son but a borrowed orphan from the village. Inspector Japp dripped river water onto the parquet, his revolver still smoking from the warning shot that had burst the Daimler's tire. Hercule Poirot stood at the foot of the staircase, small, immaculate, and terrible. His overcoat was ruined, his spats ruined, but his eyes burned with the cold fire of certainty. In his left hand he held the signet ring, fished from the river by a daring constable. In his right, the true will, ink still wet where the codicil had been torn away and replaced. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice ringing like a bell in the hush, "the winter death is ended. But before the thaw, let us lay the corpse of truth upon the table." He placed the ring on the newel post. It spun once, then settled. Reginald Thorn, born Reginald Harrington Grey, was the natural son of Lord Edmund and the actress Eleanor Grey. He came not to beg, but to claim. The letters to Lady Victoria were bait. The affair, a distraction. The camellias, his signature. Each bloom marked a life he intended to prune. Poirot unfolded the will. The original codicil, witnessed by Amelia and the chauffeur, Thorn himself in disguise, left everything to the bastard heir. Emile Blackwood was merely the scalpel. Thorn was the hand that wielded it. He turned to Dr. Blackwood. "You, monsieur, were never the target. You were the alibi." Emile's madness gave Thorn cover. With Shim, Emile became unreliable. Thorn let the ice take him. Lady Victoria's voice was raw. "He seduced me to keep Edmund jealous and blind. Every kiss was a calculation." "Précisément." and the infant's cry, recorded on a gramophone disc hidden in the crypt, was to delay us while he escaped with the forged will. Japp cleared his throat. The Daimler's on the riverbed, Thorn's body with it, case closed. Poirot's smile was thin, almost. He produced a final object, a white camellia, pressed flat between the pages of Harrington's desk diary. Between the petals lay a single brass button, the twin to the one found in the garage, engraved Harrington Yacht Club. This button was torn from Thorn's coat in the attic struggle. The diary entry beneath it reads R, returns tonight, must tell V the truth before he does. Poirot closed the diary. Lord Harrington knew. He summoned his son to confront him, to offer legitimacy, perhaps even love. Thorn came to kill, not to reconcile. The poison, the dagger, the fire, all to bury the past and seize the future. He turned to Amelia. You signed the true will at 6 o'clock. Thorn forced you to witness the forgery later, under threat. But you kept the real page, hid it in the chapel Bible. Amelia nodded, tears falling. I thought if the truth came out, the baby would be safe. Poirot knelt beside the infant. This child is innocent. The estate will care for him until the courts decide. But the Harrington line ends here, not in blood, but in greed. Lady Victoria stood. And me, you, madame, are free. The affair was a lie, the divorce threat, a bluff. You inherit nothing but your title and your conscience. Dr. Blackwood spoke quietly. Emile's body, will there be a funeral? Poirot's gaze softened. 2 brothers, 2 graves, one by water, one by fire. Let the river and the snow keep their secrets. Japp snapped his notebook shut. I'll need statements. The Yard will want the whole tale. Poirot inclined his head. Naturellement. But first... He crossed to the Christmas tree, plucked a single surviving glass bauble, and held it to the light. Inside, a tiny reflection of the room. The survivors, the ruin, the truth. Christmas, he said, is the season of revelation. The child in the manger, the star in the east. Here, the star was a camellia, and the child a lie. But the light, he let the bauble swing, the light always finds its way. Outside the snow had stopped. The sky was the colour of polished steel. Footprints led from the river to the manor gate, where a constable waited with a telegram. Thorn's body recovered. Signet ring confirms identity. Case closed. Poirot slipped the ring into his pocket. Not closed, he murmured, merely interred. The infant stirred, gave a small cry, not recorded, but real. Amelia rocked him gently. Lady Victoria reached out a trembling hand and touched the child's cheek. In the silence, the manor exhaled. The winter death was revealed, and the house, scarred, smoke-blackened, but standing, waited for spring. Chapter 10. Thaw of Justice. The sun rose fully on the 22nd of December, a pale coin in a sky scrubbed clean by the storm. Harrington Manor stood wounded but upright, its west wing blackened, its chimneys still trailing thin ribbons of smoke. Constables from the village tramped across the snow, measuring footprints, photographing the Daimler-shaped hole in the river ice, and cataloguing the secret passages that honeycombed the walls like veins in marble. In the great hall, the survivors gathered one last time. The Christmas tree had been removed, its scorched branches deemed a fire hazard, leaving only a ring of pine needles on the parquet. The Persian rug had been rolled away, the bloodstain hidden beneath fresh sawdust. Breakfast was served on a sideboard. Tea, toast, kippers, nobody touched. The infant, now officially named Edmund Grey Harrington by the parish register, slept in a hastily improvised cradle of drawers lined with Lady Victoria's cashmere shawl. Hercule Poirot entered last, immaculate in a fresh suit borrowed from the late Lord's wardrobe. The trousers were an inch too long, but the Belgian had turned them up with military precision. In his breast pocket, the signet ring, the pressed camellia, the true will. In his eyes, the satisfaction of order restored. Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, stamping warmth into his boots. Yards sending a van for the bodies. Emile Blackwood's in the icehouse. Thorns in the boathouse under guard. Coroners ruling suicide for Emile. Accidental death for Thorn. Car went through the ice. Clean enough for the newspapers. Poirot inclined his head. Clean, yes, but justice is rarely tidy. He turned to the assembly. Mesdames et messieurs, the winter death is concluded. Let us lay the final stones. Poirot placed the document on the table. Lord Harrington died intestate as to the codicil. The forged page is void. The true page, witnessed by Amelia Croft and the Harrington ring, leaves everything to the infant Edmund Grey Harrington in trust until his 25th year. Trustees, Lady Victoria Harrington, Dr. Elias Blackwood, and with my recommendation, Mademoiselle Amelia Croft. The shipping line will be sold, the proceeds invested for the boy. The manor remains in the family. Lady Victoria's eyes filled. I will stay, as guardian. The title is hollow, but the child is real. Poirot opened a small tin. Inside, every white bloom recovered from the house, the greenhouse, the river. 21 in all. One for each year Reginald Thorn waited, he said. He began cultivating them in Southampton glasshouses, grafting white onto red, an act of patience and hatred. They were his calling card, his confession, his suicide note. He scattered the petals into the cold hearth. They curled and blackened in the residual heat. A surveyor's map now covered the billiard table. Every tunnel, priest's hole, and smuggler's shaft marked in red ink. They will be bricked up, Poirot declared. No more ghosts in the walls. Dr. Blackwood signed a statement absolving himself of his brother's crimes. I will sell my practice. Take the boy to the seaside. Salt air for his lungs, distance for my conscience. Amelia Croft curtsied, awkward in her soot-streaked apron. I'll stay as nurse. The little master deserves better than secrets. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. Train leaves at noon. You'll be in London by tea. The Yard wants your report and a photograph for the files. Poirot permitted himself a small smile. I prefer the quiet of my flat and a tisane. At 11:30, the constables carried 2 plain coffins to the waiting van. Emile Blackwood, scarred, serene in death, lay in one. Reginald Thorn, hands crossed, the signet ring restored to his finger, lay in the other. A single white camellia rested on each lid, Poirot's final courtesy. Lady Victoria stood on the steps, the infant in her arms. Snow began again, soft as forgiveness. Monsieur Poirot, she called, will you return? He paused at the gate. When the camellias bloom again, madame, to see the boy walk. The Daimler, salvaged, patched, repainted, waited to take him to the station. Japp climbed in beside him. As they passed beneath the stag-crested gates, Poirot looked back once. The manor's windows glinted like eyes, no longer watchful, merely waiting. On the seat between them lay a final gift from Amelia. A tiny bouquet of forced snowdrops, the first green spears pushing through the thaw. Spring, Poirot murmured, always follows winter. The car turned onto the village road. Behind them, the footprints of the night were already filling with new snow. Ahead, the railway line ran straight and silver toward London, toward order, toward the next impossible crime. Harrington Manor faded into white. The winter death was buried, not in earth, but in memory. And somewhere in the nursery, a child laughed in his sleep, dreaming of camellias that would never again mean murder.